Hello,
No,
how are you?
I think I'm okay.
That's good.
Yep. What's the
Ernie's
story?
at 9:10 now,
Nine,
so
10, 9 o'clock, 9:10. A busy
uh,
man.
hmm?
He's a busy man.
Yeah, he's probably driving and he knows he's not going to reach home before 9:10. Even though when he says 9:10, he probably will start at 9:15.
Yeah, okay. We'll give him the extra 5 minutes.
Yeah, where are we? 28 today? Yes,
28. Yep.
yes. Mhm.
The Turbo book was almost finished, no?
Yeah, he's hopefully getting 21 this week. Maybe
I,
he got it
I, I have
already.
21.
Huh?
I have 21.
You have 21?
Yeah,
Ah,
I have 21. I have 22, I mean.
well, 22 Ernie gave us, but 21 he didn't get yet.
Yeah, I have it from Amazon.
Oh, so this we're getting for free. So the next time for 23, don't buy it until Ernie says it's going to cost us money. If not, because they're getting it for free.
When is Ernie making Aliyah?
I don't think before the end of the year.
Yeah.
All right. I think he still has a contract with his office, I think. I don't know.
I thought he was doing it within a couple of months here.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay,
Okay.
Harold just brought me home, so I want to wait until he gets home.
okay.
We are on Kav Ches 28.
Mhm.
Tomorrow we'll learn at 5 o'clock.
Okay. Did you get 21, Surba?
No,
Hmm.
but we still have a couple weeks to go with volume 20.
I think so.
But I'll send an email to them to remind them. It should have come
Okay.
out. Walter, we're just waiting a minute because Harold just dropped me off. I want to make sure Harold gets home.
Okay. For
We're on
sure.
we're on Kav Ches 28.
Oh, I got it.
And tomorrow we're going to learn at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
And then Sunday will be regular times. Shabbos will be in shul before mincha, probably 6:30, something like that. And or Mario, you tell us.
No, I didn't get the Coleno yet. So
No, you
there's,
send us an hour before, whatever. And
yeah.
then Sunday we'll do 7 o'clock daf, and 8 o'clock we'll go back to Ezra. Here's Harold. Okay, so we said we're debating whether shchita for a bird has been a Torah or not. And we said that a way to avoid kisui, let's say a person wants to use the blood for a specific purpose. So don't do shchita, do nechira and my lav ba'of, which is mashma that you need shchita. The kaboy le lidameh. So liyanika, that the bird the Havamina of the Gemara was that you need the blood from a bird because they used to put it on their clothing so that it wouldn't be attacked by insects. So the Gemara says, "Lo, we're not talking about a bird. We're talking about a chaya. The koboy leilidmei lelaka, some kind of dye, some kind of red coloring. They needed blood for that. So there's no raya for an oath." Now, Rav Yitzchak ben Pinchas said that ein shchita la'of min Torah, that it's all rabbinic, and we've been bringing kashas on that opinion. Toshma, molak besakin. The Kohen is supposed to malika on a bird from the back of his neck with his fingernail. If he used a knife, so he makes the bird a nevela. However, if Yamed in shchita lof ben Torah, if ben Torah don't need shchita, fine. You broke the bird's spinal canal, but then havele treifa, and tahali sakin l'tar midein, let the knife, just like if you have a treifa animal and you shecht it, doesn't become a nevela, it becomes a treifa. So, if Rav Yitzchak ben Pinchas is correct that ein shchita la'of min Torah, then the knife should have been mitared mitumas nevela. Hu damar ki haytana. The Baraisa is against Rav Yitzchak ben Pinchas, but it's like this following Tana. The Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer Kafar Berebi Oimer, Matamador Ach Kasher Yachelas Atzvi V'Sayal. Just like you eat the deer and the heart. What are we learning? What's the connection? It comes to teach and it is taught. Deer, which is a chaya, is compared to behemoths that are offered in the base of Mikdash that became puzzle. If an animal is puzzle and you redeem it, you can eat it through shchita, av tzri vayal b'shchita. So too, chaya, in order to eat it, it has to need shchita. However, v'of ein lo shchita b'divrei Torah. So here, this Tanakh also holds, like Rav Yitzchak ben Pinchas, that there is no shchita by a bird min Torah, elam divrei sofri. So you can't bring me a kasha from another baraisa because it's the Tana that holds that ein shchita of min Torah. Man Tana the Poligalid Rabbi Eliezer Kafir, who argues with Rabbi Eliezer Rebbe, the Tanya. Rebbe holds that there is shchita min Torah. It says v'zavachto kasher tzivisicha. You shall shecht your cows and your sheep the way I commanded you to do. Melamed shenitztav Moshe al veshet v'lakone. Moshe was told you have to divide the esophagus and the trachea. V'alrov echad ba'of, v'alrov shnayim b'behema. You need 51% by a bird of one of them, and you need 51% of the two of them by behema. And then the Mishnah said echad ba'of. If you only divide the trachea or the esophagus, either one is kosher, itmar. Rav Nachman Amar oy veshet o kana. Rav Nachman says it's either one, but Rav Ada bar Abba Amar veshet v'lo kana. No, when you're going to cut one, it has to be the esophagus. If you cut the trachea, it's not enough. Then you'd have to cut the esophagus as well. We paskin like Rav Nachman, either or. Rav Nachman Amar oy veshet o kana, because echad ktani, echad koldu, either one. Rav Ada bar Abba veshet v'lo kana, only the esophagus. My echad miyuchad, the special, unique tube the esophagus. Simin shochat chatzoin gargeres pegima dechat ha'oif. It's just a mnemonic. Meisvei. We're going to ask Kashas on Rav Nachman. Shochat es aveshet. You divided the esophagus. Then the trachea became dislocated. Ksheira, because you shechted the veshet, and you only need one. If the trachea had become dislocated and then you cut the esophagus, psula. Because the animal was a treifa when the trachea became detached. Shochad es aveshet, v'nimtzis garger shmuta. First you shechted the esophagus, and then you found that the trachea had been dislodged. And it's a suffix. Did that happen before the shechita of the esophagus or after? So zaya ma'aseh v'amru. Kol suffix b'shchita psula. Any suffix, we go l'chumra, and we say it's possible. Now you notice it only talks about cutting the esophagus. We don't talk about cutting the trachea and then finding the esophagus to be detached, which seems to imply, not like Rav Nachman, that it indeed is the case that it's only shchita of the esophagus that it is needed. So the Gemara says, lav dafka, really you could cut the trachea. The only reason it mentioned this case of cutting the esophagus because the gargeres avida lishtamuti. It's much more common for the trachea to become dislocated than the esophagus. So it told us the common case. Toshma. Shochat shnei chatzoy simonim be'of. You cut exactly 50% of the trachea in the esophagus by bird psula because you need more than 50%. Certainly vein tzarach lomer b'meima, certainly by an animal. Rabbi Yehuda ba'ov ad sheyishchot is a veshet v'savridin. Shchita is not complete unless you divided the esophagus and the carotid artery and vein. In order that, because the blood has to drain out of there. You notice it doesn't say anything about cutting the trachea, which again seems to be a kasha on Rav Nachman who said you could cut either. So the Gemara says it mentioned veshet because the mishum de veshet samach levridin, right next to the blood vessels. But it's not correct that if you cut the trachea, it's not kosher. It is kosher. Toshma. Shochad chatzi gargeres for shochad kedei shchita cheres. V'shah kedei shchita cheres. The gomar. You cut 50% of the trachea, and then you delayed, and as the time it takes to do shchita, and then you finished completing cutting the trachea. The gomar. Shchitosuk ksheira. Now my lav va'of. And you see, even cutting the trachea alone is enough. Right? Umay gemara lagargeres. All you have to do is finish the trachea. And cutting the trachea alone is okay. Which is a kasha on Ravada Barava. The Gemara says lo bebeima. We're talking about a behemoth. Umay gemara l'shchita kula. He finished the trachea, then he finished the esophagus. But it's not a raya regarding the bird case. Toshma. The trachea was already, 50% of the trachea was already cut. It had that mum. And you added just 1%. That means as long as the trachea was not more than 50% damaged, if you extend it to 51%, it's kosher. And all we're talking about here is the trachea, not the esophagus. And we must be, my lav ba'of, aren't we talking about a bird of Mike Gemara Lakana? When it says he finished cutting the trachea, which implies that just cutting the trachea alone is enough. The Gemara says, lo bebe'ema. Umay gamra levesha. It means after he cut the trachea, he finished and cut the esophagus. But no, either raya or kasha. Toshma. Ketzad moking chatas ha'of. How do you do malika for a bird chatas? you divided the spinal cord and the bone without getting rid of the majority of the flesh. Ad shemagil leveshet o lakana. And then you reach either the esophagus or the trachea. You notice or. Higil leveshet o lakana. He reaches them. He choitech siman echad. All I have to do is cut one of them. Verov basar imo. And now the remainder of the flesh, the back of the neck. Uva ola shnaim or rov shnaim. And ola, it has to be either the whole thing or majority. And here, it's either the esophagus or the trachea, the way Rav Nachman. And not like Ravada Barava. To Yufta, Ravada Barava, to Yufta. What's the final halacha? You said either or. Thereby, the Malika, maybe it was okay because you also divided the spinal cord, the neck bone. But what if you're only cutting either the trachea and the esophagus? How do we know that works? Toshma. There was a duck in Rava's house that was shechted. Also, kimamases kuadama. The neck was stained with blood. It wasn't shechted yet, but it had like bleeding on its neck. How can we check this? Obviously, the neck was attacked and there was an injury. Now we have to make sure that the trachea and the esophagus are not damaged. So, nishchata v'hadar nivdika, should we do shchita and then check it? But that's a problem. Dilba b'makav nekev kashachit. Maybe exactly where the trachea or the esophagus had a hole in it, you cut through it, and you what kind of examination is it? You can't prove anything. Nivdika v'hadar nishchata. Let's check it and then do shchita. But the best way of checking esophagus is inside out. The reason for that is the outside of the esophagus is red. The inside lining is white. So when they inverted the esophagus, the tube, you could see white. If there was any spot of blood, that was a sign that the esophagus was damaged before you shechted it. Right? So how we can't do that? You can make the duck a treifa. Amalei Rav Yosef Berei Nivdeka Lakana. Let's explore the duck, inspect it from the outside the trachea, and then cut it. V'nishcheta lakana, v'lichshrei. Then it's kosher to eat. So you see, all you have to do is cut the trachea. Then then you can remove the esophagus and check it inside out. My son is an expert. So alma echad ka'omar oy hai. That's the halacha. When you say you have to divide 51% of one of the tubes, it's either the trachea or the esophagus. So Ravada Barav is not correct, and Rav Nachman is gehalten. Rav Yehuda Omer Ad Sheyishchot. He said you have to cut the carotid artery and vein. Rav Chizal Rav Yehuda Ela Ba'of, only by a bird. Hoil v'tzolea kula echad. An animal is cut into pieces. The blood gets drained by all the vessels through cutting the pieces. But a bird is sometimes roasted whole. Remember growing up, Cornish hens. My mother would make Cornish hen for it. It's a whole hen, right? So they would roast that bird whole. So at that point, when you shecht the neck, getting all the blood out easily, that's when you should do it. So it's a blood issue. You don't need to cut the vessels in the neck of the animal. The animal you're going to cut up into pieces, the blood will drain during that process. So you're telling me that the Rav Chisda's reason of cutting it is for the blood? Vatnan. Rav Yehuda Omer Ad Sheyishchot es savridin. Yishchot, it seems like it's part of shchita. So Ema Ad Sheyin Kivas Savridin. You don't have to cut it, it's just puncture it, make a hole in it. You have to make a hole in it at the time that you cut the trachea or esophagus. Toshma. Vridin b'shchita div Rabbi Yehuda. That Rabbi Yehuda says you do the shchita on the vridin as well. That's a kasha what we just said. Ema, vridin tzarich lenakvan b'shashchita. You just have to make a hole in them. You don't have to cut them in the same motion when you cut the trachea and the esophagus. Div Rabbi Yehuda. Toshma. Armla Rabbi Yehuda. Me'achar shelo huskru vridin elotzim and dam. The only reason to cut the vessels is to get rid of the blood. Mali b'shchita, mali shelo b'shchita. Why does it have to be done with the same motion as the shchita? Melchad Rabbi Yehuda Sarah b'shchita. They're responding to Rabbi Yehuda, who must say that he does hold that the vridin have to become at the time of shchita, which seems to imply it has nothing to do with the blood. So the Gemara says no, it has to do with the blood. Hachi karmelo. Mali lenakvan b'shashchita. What do I care if I make a hole in them at the time of shchita? Mali lenakvan shelo b'shashchita. In fact, it does make a difference if I make a hole in them later. However, Rav Yehuda felt it's better to do it at the time of shchita. Why? Husar b'shashchita osidam dechaim. It's warm, so it flows out better. Shelo b'shashchita lo osidam dekor. It coagulates if you wait after the time of shchita, and it won't flow out as well. Boy Rav Yirmiyah, Vridin Rabbi Yehuda, cutting the carotid artery in vein. Shoba and Dars, but let's say you delayed or you pressed. Mao. Is it because if Rabbi Yehuda considers it shchita, and you're pausing or pressing during shchita, you invalidate it. Amar Layahu Saba, an elder said to Rav Yirmiyah, Hachi Amar Rabbi Lazar, V'amri La Amar Le'ahu Savar LeRabbi Lazar, Hachi Amar Rav Yechon, Minakvan Bekotz Venkshir. You don't have to cut them with the shchita knife, even if you used a needle, or here it's a thorn. It's not part of the shchita process. It's just to drain the blood. Tainik Avos Rav Chizda, and there's a brisa to support that. Shochat Shnei Chatzoy Simonim Ba'ov. You cut the two pipes only 50% plus. Certainly by an animal. Rav Yehuda Omer Ba'ov At Sheyishchat Zaveshet V'Zavritin. You have to cut the esophagus and the vridin. So the way Rav Chizda learned is supported by the brisa that it does have to be done in the act of shchita. The Mishnah said if you only cut 50%, it's not good. Itmar. Rava remechza mechza karov. If the esophagus or trachea, half of it is cut, half of it's not, we treat it like rov. Rav Konam or mechza mechza ain't a karov. It's not rov. So we have to understand Rav. Rav or mechza mechza karov. Hachi Amar Le Rachman LeMoshe. This lo tiyasher rupa. Don't leave 51% uncut. So by cutting 50%, you didn't leave the rov uncut. So that's why even just 50% is valid. Rav Ganam Metzla Metzlaina Karov. Hachi Amar Le Rachman LeMoshe. Shachut rupa. He told Moshe, shecht 51%. And therefore only 50% would not be good. Now, the Gemara is going to ask Kashas on Rav. Simin chatzi k'tina gageres p'kima. It's not. Chatzi echad ba'ov, you cut exactly 50% of one of them in a bird. Or echad v'chetzi b'meima. You cut one completely and 50% of the other by an animal. Shchitas psula, because you need 50% of the one of them is not enough. However, iyam it mechza mechza karov, like Rav, amai pasul, avid le rov. It's treated like rov. So midrabon and dilma lois lemevid paga. The rabbis pasuled it as a gzeira, but enachanami according to Rav minat Torah, it's okay. Arav katina toshma hilkud l'shnayim. You have an oven that became tummy. So a kli It becomes tummy, you have to break. You broke it, but vehein shavim. The two pieces are the same. Shneim tmein. We can't know exactly one is 51, one is 4. We treat it, you can't split an oven so it's exactly the same. One piece is probably larger. And therefore, the larger piece is still viewed as the oven that is tameh. Implying, if we would be able to divide it specifically 50-50 tahirin. Well, amai tahirin, according to Rav, 50 is like rov. Zil hacha yekaruba and zil hacha. Each one can be viewed as rov, and therefore it would be tameh. You can't have 51% and 51% two rows when you take one clean divided in two. That's physically impossible. You can't consider the two sides rove. Okay, stop here.
So,
Okay, have a good day. Good night, everybody. We'll see everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Tomorrow?